Q&A. So let's open it up to the audience. We have 40 people on the call. Who has questions for either David or for me?
All right, so I'm gonna go through the kind of questions that are in the Zoom Q&A. I'll just ask them, and then I think like some of them are directed towards people. Otherwise, it's just one of you can do it. So first one way early on was, what is the most effective way to prep for PM interviews? Very general question. What do y'all think?
I'll have David go first.
Yeah, I guess I can talk a little bit about my experience prepping for these as well. I watched a lot of YouTube videos about people doing mock interviews. I thought that was really helpful. I think having a good understanding of the current state of business and technology is very crucial, especially since a lot of these questions, as Nancy mentioned, are very focused on that company or like on that industry as a whole. It's good to have those numbers down as well. In terms of other resources, I also read the Cracking the PM Interview book. I thought that was pretty good there. But generally, the best resources are definitely like the people that you're able to practice with. One-on-one tutoring is usually like the most, there's been a lot of studies that show that that's like the most successful way to improve your own performance in one area or another. And I think just having like people that you can practice with as you go through this process and like you kind of work through it with each other, I think is generally the most impactful thing that you can do. I don't know, Nancy, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I agree with the YouTube videos. When I was prepping though, there were no YouTube videos, but there were books. So I definitely recommend reading Cracking the PM Interview and what was the other one? Decode and Conquer, right? Those are very good books to read. It covers all the fundamentals, which is like frameworks. But then, okay, so that is Prep 101. Prep 201 is let's practice your product thinking skills. And this you should try to, it's like exercise. Let's do it in bite sizes throughout the day. So when you're at home, when you're cooking, you're thinking, how can I improve this kitchen? Then you're thinking, who am I improving the kitchen for? It's for me. Who am I? I am someone who lives there. I need to cook for the family. Okay, how do I improve the kitchen for me? And then maybe you do that and I don't know, do something else. Then you go to your bedroom and okay, what can I do to make this bedroom better? Right. So the point I'm trying to make here is once your product thinking muscles are strong, it automatically kind of rewires your brain to have that mindset. You're always thinking about user empathy. You're always thinking about what is motivating the user. Why is this problem important? And then once you have that empathy embedded in you as muscle memory, then you're able to come up with creative solutions. So step 101 is understand frameworks, etc. Watch YouTube videos, binge those YouTube videos. And then when you're just going on with your day-to-day, always think, how can I improve this? How can I improve that? And that, I think, is the best way to practice.
Great stuff. Next question, also kind of related, it's a little bit general, but related to interviewing in general, is what characteristics is the interviewer? I guess this would be probably better for Nancy to start off with, but what were you looking for during the interview? What are kind of like, I guess, characteristics, boxes to check, all that kind of stuff?
So I'm not looking specifically for a framework. If the interviewer says, okay, I'm going to apply the circle method, I'm going to think, oh, book smart, but are you street smart? Can you then adapt, right? I'm really thinking, can I follow your thought process? I want to understand who you are as a PM. I want to know how you make decisions, because that then tells me, how are you going to make the call on the job? What are you basing your decisions on? Is it based on a user pain point? Is it based on some kind of company initiative, strategy, whatever, right? I just want to better understand how you make decisions. And to help me follow your thought process, you need to communicate very clearly, especially in a remote setting when you're not standing in front of a whiteboard right? This is where David did a very good job reminding me and summarizing things for me. And then he numbers things. Okay, the first pain point is this, and then he labels it. Then I could, have a better and a clearer understanding of his thought process.
Well, yeah. Next question, this one specifically for David, is you did a wonderful job like staying organized throughout your responses and like structuring the way you kind of talked about them. And so do you have any like tips to actually like track your thought process during this? And I'm gonna kind of amend that as well and say like you spent like no time thinking. It was just talking about kind of your process, and you really like did a really good job kind of thinking out loud. How do you like, or do you have any tips to like be able to do that? And like how'd you get to that point?
Probably should have spent more time thinking then. I guess to answer that question specifically, I'm also the type of person that likes to think out loud as well. So I think that, helps on my end. I think, I've also gone through this process very extensively in terms of my practice. And I think going through practice, like going through a lot of that fairly extensively, has helped me be able to develop an ability to be able to think and talk at the same time. I don't know if that kind of helps guide what you're thinking there, but I think like to start out, it certainly is very beneficial for any question that you get to first take a few minutes. What I always recommend is like, okay, once you get a question, the first thing I say is, thank you so much for the question. Can I take a few minutes to like write a few things down? And I think what really helped with this is because I already knew kind of related to food, kind of like maybe the way I wanted to frame this question, which I guess I was too eager to do looking back on that. Definitely being able to take time to write stuff down is really crucial. After you do that more and more, as you get into that process and you kind of like build out those muscles, as Nancy mentioned, it is like exercise in that sense. You develop almost like a second sense, I suppose, that'll help you be able to both think and talk at the same time. And I think that's something that's really valuable, is that it just takes a lot of time and energy to be able to get to that point. And I think from my experience, the ability primarily comes from most of the practice that I had to do to get here.
Yeah, I would agree. And also it's exactly like training for, I don't know, like a sports competition. It is literally muscle memory. And you also need to kind of get to know yourself a little better. For me personally, I cannot type and talk at the same time, but I can probably write and talk at the same time. I don't know why. When I'm typing, I'm just like super focused on typing, and I cannot speak, I cannot think. I'm just like typing. And so when I was practicing and I was trying to type at the same time, like it just didn't work. So you need to find ways that work for you, and everyone is different.
Great. And on the note of practicing, next question we have is, this was also for David. It's more about kind of your experience. How did you get started with PM interviews? And more specifically, like, did you do any other internships before you got into a PM track? What brought you here, and like, why PM?
Yeah, so I guess for me, I learned about product management my sophomore internship. I work at a startup fintech company as a software engineer. And during that time, I had a chance to meet a product manager on the other side. And I was like, oh, what do you do for work? And they're like, oh, I do product management. I was like, oh, what's that? And then they drew this nice diagram, which was like business, CS, and like UX or something like that. I was like, well, I do two of those three. Might as well take a look at it. So over that summer of sophomore year, I read the Cracking the Product Management interview book. I also read the Cracking the Coding interview book. And basically going through that process was really helpful for me because I learned more about this job and more about what this was like. I think what really helped is that a lot of my personal interests really aligned with product management. And like junior fall, when I was prepping for all of my job interviews and all of the product management, new grad and internship roles there, what really helped is that it very much so aligned with my personal interest. I was president for the business technology group, an undergraduate organization. I was also a teaching assistant for computer systems. I was involved with my community as an orientation leader. And through all those initiatives leading out, I was also really big. I did a lot of hackathons freshman and sophomore year. And I think all of that kind of combined together, where it's like, oh, I could do, like, you could do this, you can make money doing this. This is so much fun kind of thing. So like when I was going through these actual interview questions, it was actually really interesting to be able to think through the stuff. And it is hard to think about this certainly on the spot. But I think what I found it really valuable was that, like, as I went through these problems, I actually, as crazy as it sounds, like, enjoyed the interview process, enjoyed thinking about these, whether it was like product design, product strategy, or whatnot. And because I was able to like really enjoy the interview process, I think the interviewers that I had also were maybe able to see that as well. And I think it really much so like aligned with, all along those ends. And I think that, worked out really well. I will also say is that, like, when I was going through this process, I did not know how hard these jobs were to get until afterwards. I just thought, I just kind of applied for everything everywhere junior fall and was hoping for the best. And a lot of it is also due to luck. I think a huge factor, especially for any of these jobs, is that, like, there are so many qualified candidates. I had nothing that I think really, like, stood out for me compared to other candidates. It is a huge amount of luck involved in this process as well. And I do feel incredibly fortunate for that component.
I want to +1 on what David said earlier, which is the energy level. So energy it's when one person is attracted to another. And when your energy levels are kind of like resonating, then the interviewer ends up really liking the candidate, because they can then feel that, oh yeah, I can see myself working with David, for example. And that is where like the PM mindset is important, mastering the craft is important, the body language is important, and how you're talking to the interviewer is important, right? Like, so David said that he was thrown off guard by my question, but he didn't show it, right? He was very like excited to kind of talk through this exercise. Like, I did not feel any of the, oh my God, like I'm screwed type of feeling, right? That's energy. So a huge part of the interviewing process is also figuring out, like, what energy are you sending to the interviewer? That's very important.
Sounds really good. Energy, very great. Another question. I'm gonna go out of order-ish because I want to end with a different one, but it's kind of some examples of questions relating to cognitive psychology and product knowledge. So do you have any like things for just like anything that would like revolve around there, or examples of questions for health wearable devices like an Apple Watch? What could be like questions related to that, or resource or places to go to find questions about that?
Specifically about wearables?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of resources that are related to wearables, but like any other product question, it starts with, why would a user want to use it? What's the point? And what was the life before that product? And then what's the life after it? And what's the delta and why is that important? I would always start there.
Got it. Cool. Makes sense. All right. And then last question, I kind of want both of you to answer this. So we'll start with David, because, you did do you were in the hot seat, but it's, can you like break down, I guess, kind of 4 to 6 like general steps on how you go from a high level to your details and your solution? So kind of like, what's your general framework for how you approach these questions? How do you scope down, and how do you go about that? Both, I guess, for David, through your experience, like what you've done, what you think is the move, and then also then Nancy, what do you think is like ideal, or like how have you like kind of taught people to do it?
Yeah, so I guess starting out for this question specifically, thinking about it at a high level, I think Nancy did a good job of guiding me to get to that point. I don't know if I would have, specifically thought about it at such a high level without that initial guidance. I think in general, being able to kind of move across that vertical change, both from you specifically talking about the user and that pain point in that specific instance, bringing it to the higher level for that like user in a general setting, bringing it another higher level, maybe like multiple users or like a bunch of users, or all the users who are using this, and then the highest level setting being like, how does this impact society as a whole? I think the most important part of this is definitely being able to apply an empathetic mindset and being able to have like a deep understanding of how this affects the user. I think that's a pretty hard thing to train, and it just requires, well, the best way that I've been able to find to really build upon that is just like learning about how different people live their lives, because that's the best way for me to improve my empathy and being able to understand, if you're building something out that affects millions or billions of people, it's very difficult to obviously understand every one of those lives. So what can I do as a product manager to be able to kind of understand maybe a snippet of that as well? So building upon that empathy, I think, is crucial to be able to understand the user at the specific level, and then hoping to be able to channel that to a broader level as well. I do think it's incredibly difficult to be able to really like think about it at a very high level, as Nancy mentioned, thinking about like for our specific question, how that affects like CMU as a whole, because it's very abstract, and the best way to potentially try to go about that, I think, is at the end of the day, if your product improves one person's life, then I think you've done a good job in that sense, and focusing on that core user is the most important thing to do. And then if you're able to find a way to tie that back up to the high level, it's usually about compounding that effect for all those users that are involved.
Yeah, so I agree with David, and I'm going to repeat myself again. A lot of this is muscle memory, and a lot of this is a different muscle that we're exercising. So when I first started out, it was hard for me to think, 1, 2, 3 dimensions out. For me though, journaling really helps, because when I'm journaling, my mind is kind of just going wild. And when I'm not constrained, then I'm able to just think freely. And the more you try to, and it's really just brainstorming, really. The more you brainstorm, the more you recognize patterns later on. So in the example of food, if I were to journal on food, then what am I thinking about? Well, high level bucket is always kind of like individuals and then businesses. And I think that type of pattern applies in a lot of different type of problems, whether it's like health or traveling or sports. There's always like an individual component, and then there's a business component. Okay, so that already nailed it down by like a ton, right? So who are the businesses in the food area, food industry? Then we have the restaurants, we have the cafes, we have delivery drivers, we have front office, we have back office. And you just think about it in terms of brainstorming. And then who are the individuals? We have the people who pay for food, the people who are being fed without having to pay for it, people who need to cook their own meals, people who don't want to cook. Right now, you're starting to segment. But when you're segmenting, you're also trying to recognize some patterns, because at the end of the day, the way you pick a problem to focus on is always, well, this is impactful, but why though? So I would say the first step is to just brainstorm, go as wide as you can, and then like figure out segmentation later, because the first step is, let's go wide before we go deep.
Cool. All right, very, very insightful things. That was our last question, and we're gonna kind of call it here. So do you guys have anything else you want to like add, say, talk about? Anything?
I have nothing on my end.
I want to say, don't feel discouraged, or like when you're feeling overwhelmed, there are ways to get help and ask for help. And I think step one is ask for help. But when you're asking for help, it's helpful to then understand which aspect are you needing help on, right? So when I remember when I was prepping, when I was feeling so overwhelmed, I would just say, help me. But then the person said, okay, which part of product sense? Like it's so wide, right? So then it required me to try a bunch of questions on my own. And then I'm able to figure out, okay, I always get stuck here. Segmentation, for example. And then I would then ask people, okay, how do you segment? Is it by persona? Is it by age? Is it by life stage? Is it by, I don't know, other things? And again, like how you're segmenting is, again, you're just brainstorming different ways to segment. So keep practicing. It requires practice.
Cool. Great. All right. Everyone, you heard that. Keep practicing. So yeah, I guess I just want to say like thank you to David. I know it was kind of a whole hour and 30 minutes of being kind of in the seat, but you did a really great job. Wonderful work.
Thank you.
And thank you to Nancy as well. Great job kind of facilitating everything and going through the feedback. A lot of valuable insights from both of you. Yeah, that is everything for today. So yeah, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you for organizing this.
Thank you for now. Bye. Have a good weekend.
Everyone.